Hello, my name is Jeff Jordan, and I want to welcome you to this webinar on networking at the 2018 National Postal Forum. This webinar is one in a series of webinars presented in conjunction with the National Postal Forum. The next National Postal Forum is scheduled for May 6th through the 9th, 2018 at the Henry B. Gonzalez Convention Center in San Antonio, Texas. For the vendors on the call, don't miss out on the premier marketing event for mailing professionals and USPS business customers. Exhibit where you can reach your target customers more effectively and efficiently. Booth spaces are assigned on a first-come, first-served basis, so act quickly. Go to the NPF website for the latest information. It's at www.npf.org. If you have any questions during this webinar, please use the dialog box that appears in the GoToWebinar controls. Also, we'll leave plenty of time at the end of the webinar for additional questions. In addition to covering the prepared remarks, we'll answer as many of those questions as time allows, so let's get started. Mark, what will we cover in today's webinar?
Jeff, thanks. Today's webinar, we're going to cover a lot of different topics, and at the end of the session, the attendees should be able to answer the following questions. What is networking? Why is networking important to you? Who can network? Where do you network while you're attending the National Postal Forum? And most importantly, how do you network while you're at the National Postal Forum? I'll even include a checklist for you to put in your packing list as you head down to the San Antonio next month.
So Mark, what's the definition of networking?
The first place I went to was dictionary.com. Of course, for those of us our age, we know that we used to go to a bookshelf and get a dictionary, but now we go online. And dictionary.com says that a network is something resembling an open fabric or structure. Specifically, they give three different choices. The first is that a network is a system of lines or channels that cross or interconnect, like a network of railroads. The second is a complex interconnected group or system. For those of us on this call, I think the first thing that would come to mind is the U.S. Postal System's network. And the last definition, and the one we're going to concentrate on today, is that a network is an extended group of people with similar interests or concerns who interact and remain in informal contact for mutual assistance or support. And that last part is so important. We interact and remain in informal contact for mutual assistance and support. Networking is not about what you can get for yourself, but networking is about what you can do for others. The next definition comes from Harvey Mackay. And for those of you who don't recognize the name, Harvey wrote the book back in the 1990s called Swim with the Sharks Without Being Eaten Alive. And he followed that up with another book called Dig Your Well Before You're Thirsty. And of all the sales gurus out there, I like to go to Harvey because he came from our industry. He was the president of Mackay Envelope. In his book, Harvey wrote, for most people, networking is learned behavior, like learning to swim. It is gradual, often painful, and even scary process of trial and error with small incremental steps and finally a few breakthroughs. So it's a continual process. Networking is not, what you may read about sitting down on a plane and you look next to you and you say, oh my gosh, it's Bill Gates. And you talk to him, and by the time you land at your destination, he's writing you a check for $1 million. That's not networking. That's a dream. For those of us who travel a lot, and last year I flew over 100,000 miles, Bill Gates was never sitting next to me. And he probably because he has a private plane, so he only sits next to his wife or his friends. So remember, networking is learned behavior, and it's a continual process. And I'd like to add to that definition by saying that networking is the one self-improvement activity that anyone can do, regardless of age, education, or talent. And as I've said before, Successful networking is about what you can do for others and not about what others can do for you.
So that leads to why should we network?
Well, I've got 5 different reasons up here. And the first thing that people who are coming to the NPF, and especially for those who are on here who are vendors, is the quote, "Everyone lives by selling something." That's a quote from Robert Louis Stevenson, an author who wrote Treasure Island many, many years ago. You may remember that book when you were growing up. When you think about selling, it doesn't just mean that you're in sales, although we do have salespeople on the call today. You may be selling an idea to your boss. You may be selling yourself, like interviewing for a job. When you go down to the Postal Forum, you see some software equipment that you think could help your shop, and now you have to sell that idea to your boss. Or you may have to sell the ideas to your employees. You learned a lot about processing mail, you've learned a lot about new ways to print, and you want to integrate that at your company. Well, you can't just do it, you have to sell the idea. And that's where networking comes in. It allows you to get to resources to help you and resources that connect you to other people who have the information you need. And although the NPF is an educational conference, education, training, and talent will only take you so far. The old saying is true. It's not what you know, it's who you know. You may know a lot, and you may be the smartest person down at the National Postal Forum, but a group of people together and the thousands of people that are going to be there combined know more than you. Now, while you're at the NPF, you may want to meet a specific person, say the Postmaster General, Megan Brennan. Well, you don't know who knows who and who can make that connection for you. Networking brings you into other people's networks. Some of you may have heard the concept, the 6 degrees of separation. That was founded back in 1967 by a gentleman named Stanley Milgram. And what he did is he gave several hundred people in Omaha, Nebraska, where I'll be going later this month, he gave them a letter, and by mailing it, the key word here, folks, to somebody they knew, they had to find a way of getting it to a stockbroker in Sharon, Massachusetts. Remember, this is 1967, pre-internet. Through the exercise, Milgram was able to prove that the entire world and the entire world's population is connected by only 6 degrees. So think about that. When you want to connect to somebody, who do you know that might be in their network or in their network's network? And whether you're a vendor with a booth, an industry attendee, you don't know who's looking for you. There may be somebody out there right now who's looking for somebody with your talent, your knowledge, your product, or your service. But they can't find you through their network, so they probably won't. So you need to be out there so that people can find you. My last job in corporate America was never published in a newspaper, never put on monster.com. What it was is that a consultant had been hired by State Street to renovate their mail operations, re-engineer it, reorganize it, and find a new leader. If I wasn't in that consultant's network, I never would have gotten the call for the job interview. So you need to be out there so that other people can find you. And the last part, remember, people are interesting just as human beings. It isn't all about business. It's about connecting with each other at a human level. Who knows? You might just meet somebody you like as a fellow human being.
So, Mark, who can and should network?
Well, Jeff, as you know, I've gone to a speech trainer to help me get better at speaking, and one of the things he taught me in the class on public speaking is that never read directly from a slide. But the one exception is when the context is a little complicated. So let's start this at the top. Anyone can network. Absolutely anyone can network. Networking is something that anyone and everyone must learn. There's no excuse for not networking. If you aren't comfortable talking to people you don't know, then you must go outside your comfort zone. To be honest, I've taken a test to prove this, and I'm actually an introvert. I'd rather spend the day reading a book more than anything else. My favorite place, at least in my house and maybe the world, is my comfortable chair. I have a little table next to it for a cup of coffee and my book, and that's what I love. But if I just sit in that chair and just read books, I'm not going to be successful in business. And even more importantly, I'm not going to be successful in life. I need people in my life, so I need to meet people, to talk to people, and network with people. And sometimes people just say, wow, Mark, you make it look so easy. That's only because I work at it.
I agree. You do make it look easy. Who did you first learn networking from?
Jeff, I was lucky. I had a great example growing up, and you've heard me talk a lot about my dad. Here's a picture of me with my late father, and he was probably the greatest network I've ever met. Growing up, it seemed that everyone I met in my town knew who my father was and knew my family. Of course, the fact that my father did have 10 kids set him apart from a lot of other people. But he also joined groups and clubs. He was active in the American Legion, the Veterans of Foreign Wars, and even a local men's club. He was very active as a postal clerk, and he was part of the postal clerks unions. The postal clerks had their own unions back in the 70s. But the mail handlers had their own union, the letter carriers still have their own union. He made sure he networked at work with the mail handlers and the letter carriers. In fact, he got to know the letter carriers so well, he was the only person outside the union who was invited to their Christmas party. Did you know that 25 years after he retired, he was still getting that invitation? And for my postal people out there, you know that postmasters aren't even invited to the carrier's Christmas party. When my dad was about 60, he joined the local Knights of Columbus, something that's usually for men in their 20s and 30s. I asked him why, and he said he always thought about joining, but never really had the time. Now, with all of us moving out of the house, going to college, getting married, he had the time. He also said that when he looked around at the last wake he'd gone to, there were a lot of his friends were very old and starting to die off, so he wanted to make sure there were plenty of people at his funeral. That's a true story, and if you know any Irishmen from Boston, you know I'm telling the truth. Well, he did pass away several years ago, and I can tell you that it wasn't an empty church, and the Knights were there in full splendor. So why did he go through this as a postal clerk? Why could he network with anyone? I think it had to do with that he knew who he was and his identity.
Mark, why would someone want to network with me?
Well, that's a really good question, and it's something we all need to answer for ourselves. So I'm going to ask everybody on this call and the web to do this little exercise with me. And you have to be really honest. And you're by yourself in front of a computer screen, so no one's going to see you and see what you write down. Right now you see a picture of an island. And what I'd like you to do is give me permission to take you to this island for 15 minutes. And as you can see, it's not too far away from the mainland. It's sunny, there's a beach, there's trees if you need shade like I do. There's whatever food you like, whatever beverages you like are all available, and we're going to be there for 15 minutes. But during those 15 minutes, you need to leave all of your roles behind. So by role, I mean you're not a father or a mother, son or daughter, sister or brother. You have none of those. You're not a manager. You're not a salesperson. You're not an operations clerk, right? You have none of those roles. You're leaving that behind for 15 minutes. And you're going to leave anything else you use to identify yourself, whether you're a runner, a golfer, a fisherman, whatever it is, you're going to leave that behind. You're going to get it all back, don't worry, but for 15 minutes, I want you to leave that behind. Now I want everyone to take a moment. In the upper left-hand corner, you see a circle with an I below it. Now that you've left all your roles behind, I want you to rate what's left. And that circle, I'd like you to put in a rating from 0 to 10 on what you're worth without your roles. So a 0 means without your roles in life, father, mother, manager, salesperson. Without those roles, you have no value. and then up to a 10 if you think you still have value. So we're going to be quiet for 15 seconds and think about that. And I want you to write down your answer. So we're going to be paused for 15 seconds. Now, I'm not going to make anybody tell me your answer, but I'm going to tell you what your answer should be. Everybody on this webinar should have a 10 in that circle, because that I stands for your identity. It's your concept of self and a reflection of your self-esteem. If you put down anything less than a 10, it may be because somebody told you you were average and you believe that. But what you were was perhaps an average student, an average employee, an average son or daughter. Like I said, I'm one of 10. I think I fit around 4 or 5. So you have to think about this. You are the only you that's ever existed. It means in 4 billion years of this planet being around, 14 billion years of the universe being around, you're the only you that has ever been around. And you have to realize you are different from everyone else, and you are unique, and you are perfect as yourself. Now, that doesn't mean you're necessarily perfect in your roles, but you have to start believing you're perfect in yourself before you go forward. You can only be a better parent, a better son or daughter, a better salesperson, a better manager when you first believe in your own self-worth. To do that, we need to recognize it, and we want you to meet that person. We aren't concerned about your roles. We want to know who you are, and we want to meet the 10 that's you. And the only way we can do that is if we network.
Mark, that's a great perspective. But where do people network specifically at the National Postal Forum?
Well, Jeff, the folks at the NPF have put together a schedule with a lot of events to help maximize the opportunities for network. It starts on Sunday morning, and the NPF is holding a charity golf outing. This is a great way to meet people, and you know what? Even if you're a really bad golfer like me, because I often end up in the wrong fairway, and then I get to introduce myself to people who are in different foursomes. It works out great. The great part about this tournament, and I've participated in the past, is that very few people take their golfing seriously. They're there to enjoy the nice weather, have some fun, and meet others. It's a great place to network. And if golf isn't your thing, on Saturday morning, with the Habitat for Humanity of San Antonio, the National Postal Forum, and the Berkshire Company are teaming up for another event. The NPF will assign the first 20 volunteers to help construct a single-family home in San Antonio and give a helping hand to a local, hard-working family in need. There's no experience needed for this, but again, it's a great opportunity to meet new people, and at the same time, you're giving something back to the community.
There are over 120 vendors exhibiting at the National Postal Forum this year. How does an attendee get the most out of the exhibit hall without being overwhelmed?
Jeff, just as you need a plan for the overall conference, you need a plan for the exhibit hall. A good plan would be to set aside times you'll be in the exhibit hall. You have to set aside 30% of your time during the conference to get to the hall. You need to manage that time. Before you get to the show, mark down in your calendar when you'll be there, when you are going to dedicate time to the hall. Most of the conferences today wisely put the luncheon stations in the exhibit hall, and the NPF follows this. So you have to walk through to get your lunch. But don't rely just on that. Schedule set times, and you know what? Set appointments up with key vendors. If you're attending the show hoping to check out a specific piece of equipment or specific software and you want to get a detailed explanation, reach out to the vendors beforehand. They're listed on the NPF site. Establish an exact time when you'll be at the booth. This allows the vendor to make sure that the right person is available at that time to answer your questions. Remember, they have to schedule time at the booth as well, and you want to make sure the right person is there for you. Also, take time to map out the conference and map out your route through the hall. Sometimes you may just want to roam aimlessly up and down, and I do that when I'm relaxing. However, if I need to find the exact information, I look at the map, I familiarize myself where all the vendors are located, so I have a clear plan on how I'm going to get through the aisles and the booths, just in case I don't have a lot of time. Also, stop and seek out new vendors. The constant theme is that trade shows and the NPF are about education and networking, and that includes learning about new products. Stop and talk to at least 3 vendors that you don't do business with today. Find out what it is they do and share with them what you're planning on doing. Think about vendors you don't even know what they do. If you go by as you're walking down the aisles and you see a vendor name that doesn't look familiar, stop and talk to the salesperson. Trust me, they're there to meet new people as well. They're there to meet you. Don't think you're wasting their time or wasting your time. Remember, you don't know what you're going to be responsible for tomorrow. You don't necessarily know where you're going to be working. So learn as much about the industry and learn as much about what's out there for you from these vendors.
So Mark, what about the vendors who are exhibiting? Do you have any tips for them?
Jeff, I think trade shows are tremendous opportunities for vendors to reconnect with existing clients and meet new prospects. The best way to approach this is like a well-managed sales call, except instead of just with one prospect, it's with thousands of people. First off, you need to make sure that the right people are in the booth and the booth looks like a first-class representation of your company. Remember, while you're at the trade show, you and your booth are your company's brand. You represent your brand as much as your product or service represents your brand. It's important that you look the part. If there are one sheets, they should be spotless with no typos, and they should be in full color, and there should be business cards at the ready. Who's ever working the booth should have on clean, well-pressed clothes. I know a lot of vendors like to wear logo shirts or maybe even a little bit of a getup. That's great. However, they should still be clean and prepped. There should be no eating or drinking at the booth. Now, I know there's water because we get dry mouth, whatever, but even that should be limited. No prospect wants to sit there and have a conversation with somebody with food in their mouth. You should have a huddle at the beginning and the end of every day. In operations, we're familiar with the daily huddle. As a trade show, you should have one at the beginning of the day where you reconfirm the booth schedule, confirm any plans, customers or prospects appointments, or anything else that might be coming up. Then at the end of the day, go over the highlights and note what could have been done better. If there's a particularly hot issue, be it positive or negative, the positive could be that there's a hot lead that someone needs to be followed up. Or negative, there was an unpleasant experience and that person needs to be followed up with. Make sure somebody's going to follow up immediately, not after the show, during the show. I talked earlier about business cards. You want to make sure you give and get cards. Have ample cards readily available. Consider purchasing just a small business card holder to put on your booth's table or on the equipment. Now, I know that the NPF has scanners, and that's great for importing information later into your customer contact. But try to collect cards as well. You can make notes on the back about your conversation, and you can use that during your follow-up. And lastly, reach out to passerbys. Just as I've asked attendees to find new vendors they don't know, well, vendors, don't wait for people to come up to you, go up to them. Many people are shy and won't initiate a conversation. Politely ask for a few minutes of their time, and even if they aren't an immediate prospect, they might be a prospect tomorrow. Treat everyone as if they're your next big sale.
So Mark, what social events are taking place at the National Postal Forum?
Well, one of the best parts of my job is that I travel as much as I do. But on Sunday night, the area receptions makes the one night where I can visit many parts of the country without spending any time on a plane. Something I love about our current Postmaster General is that she's a networker. Hopefully you can pick her out in this photo. And she makes the rounds and stops by the different areas and the different PCCs. And not only does she do group photos, She'll even take a picture with a consultant. You know, and this is also a tremendous opportunity to meet the postal executives from your area. They're here to meet you. If you don't know them, introduce yourself because they want to know you. Now, you may have a complaint or a service issue. This isn't the time to get that solved, but it is a time to find out where the executives will be later on during the NPF. So you can find time on Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday to meet with them. You know, when you're in line for beverage or to get some food, talk to the people around you. It doesn't have to be anything profound. It can be simply, hi, how are you? Or isn't San Antonio beautiful? The conversation will either continue naturally or it won't. Either way, the line is short, so don't worry about it.
So what about other evenings, Mark?
There are planned social events at the forum, including the PCC reception on Monday evening, the exhibitors reception in the exhibit hall on Tuesday, and the closing event at San Antonio's historic Sunset Station on Wednesday. There's a lot to do every night, and it's wonderful to spend time with the folks you like and laugh and enjoy yourself.
And of course, there are classes. Those are more good opportunities for networking.
You're right, Jeff. And now, of course, as an instructor, I believe in the importance of attending in classes because we spend a lot of time preparing them. But they are, like you said, a great opportunity to network. The first is right before the class starts. Take a moment to say hi to the person next to you. Ask how the NPF is going for them. Ask if they've ever heard this speaker before. And as with social events, it doesn't have to be a long conversation, just an introduction. After the class, you may want to talk to that person, find out what they thought about it and where they're going next. If the conversation goes well, ask for their business cards so you can follow up. And then you may want to talk to the instructors before or after the class. I love the opportunity to meet people who come to my classes at NPF. While reviewing the names of the people who signed up for this webinar, I smiled as I recognized a lot of names from previous forums, and I look forward to seeing you all in San Antonio. Don't forget to give a card and get a card. If you want to attend classes, this says I'm teaching 4 classes this year. So on Sunday, I'll be teaching with Sean Joyce at the Forum Orientation. On Monday and Tuesday is boot camps part 1 and 2. And on Wednesday, I'll be presenting an entirely new session, Leadership Best Practice and How to Apply Them to Your PCC. Joining me will be Neil Fetterman from CarMax, and we're excited about this session. And Jeff, as you know, I found out last night there's going to be a 5th session on Monday afternoon, again with Sean Joyce, called You Don't Have to Be a Supervisor to Be a Leader.
And it goes on. Mark, you've shared what is networking, why we should network, who can network, and where to network. So that leads us to the most important question. How do I network at the NPF?
So I'm going to share 6 tips, and what I call the top 6, to really help you take advantage of networking. The first one is to display a positive attitude. People like to meet upbeat people. Now, if you display an attitude of confidence and resolve, people will be drawn to that. Now, it's confidence and resolve, not ego and stubbornness. Think about that. When you walk into a group, whether it's a party or a meeting, people are generally congregated around the others that are smiling. So have a smile. Be happy to be there. And when you're talking to people, look them in the eye. This is really important. Look at them. Make sure you're giving them visual clues that you're listening to what they're saying. When talking to someone, look for the ways that you're similar, not different. For example, everyone at the NPF has something in common. We all work in mail. So no matter what you do, you work in mail, you have something in common with the other folks there. Now, the other part is pick up on what the other person says that may relate directly or indirectly to you. Many years ago, I met Rod Waltz of Waltz Mailing Solutions. And for those of you who don't know him, Rod invented one of the first automated certified mailers. And you've probably seen him at the NPF before. Rod told me that to be remembered, be interested, not interesting. Don't try to impress people with what you know. Instead, find out what they know. Find out about their achievements. Find out why they're a 10. Let them have the spotlight and show an interest in what they're talking about. And then lastly, your mother was right. Politeness counts. Show respect to the people you're talking to. Don't use off-color language or tell risque jokes. Don't put down other people, whether it's an individual, a race, a religion, or nationality. This isn't political correctness, folks. This is politeness. You don't know this person you're just meeting, and you don't know that you might offend them. And if you hear gossip, you don't repeat it. Remember that meeting people is the first step of networking. You must cultivate the garden that's your network in order for it to grow. So follow up after the forum with emails or a LinkedIn connection, or maybe, now this is going to sound drastic, send a letter, a physical letter in the mail to somebody after meeting them. Wouldn't that be amazing, when you're going through your contact list on a regular basis, that you take 5, maybe 3 minutes out of your time to write a letter to somebody for really no particular reason? Remember the first definition that we talked about at the beginning of this webinar. You need to remain in informal contact with each other. So just sending a note, a letter, or a card, you can be the reason for brightening someone's day.
True. Mark, what about the people who are attending the conference for the first time? Any pointers?
Well, as we said earlier, it's important to plan your time, especially the classes. Take time before the conference to select the courses that will provide the most value for you. Plan which vendors you need to visit, and don't forget to leave some open time, whether that's to rest or to take advantage of a happy accident like meeting a new friend or learning about an exciting new product. When in classes, look for veteran conference goers. Often they'll have ribbons on their badges like PCC leadership roles. So introduce yourself, ask them how they think the show is going, and then share your schedule and ask for advice. Conversely, look for fellow first-timers. At the NPF, there's usually a sticker or ribbon for first-time attendees. They're probably experiencing many of the same concerns that you are. Well, why not face those together? In the exhibit hall, talk to vendors. And here, I'm talking about beyond the product or service. Ask them if they've been to the show before. Is there anything they recommend you not miss? Or ask them about San Antonio and the Riverwalk, and where's the best place to go after class? And lastly, as we said earlier, talk to speakers who are presenting, especially if you enjoyed their class. You can start the conversation with a comment or a question. From there, you can ask them about the NPF and what else you should be doing. Speakers love to talk to people. That's why we're speakers.
Now, Mr. Fallon, ever since I've known you, you've had a checklist for every major activity. Do you have one for networking at the NPF?
Jeff, you know me better than some members of my own family. So yes, there is a checklist. Number one, everyone should have business cards, and you should have them with you at all times during the NPF, including those social events. Throw some in your wallet, your bag, or whatever it is. Put some in your pocket, but you should always have business cards with you. If your company doesn't provide them for you, you need to get your own. And you might want to have it personal depending upon your company's rule, because having a non-approved card can get you in trouble. So attain a personal email address through a cloud service like Gmail or Hotmail, and then design a card. Make it simple. Your name, your physical address, and your email address. That's all you need. There's templates online, and they're built into most word processing programs. And then print-to-order cards are available at most office supply stores. They sell blank cards that can be fed through inkjet and laser printers. Avery is the most common one you're probably going to find, but many of the office companies have them under their brand names as well. For a minimal investment, you could even have cards printed at a local printer or through one of the online services. So make sure you bring extra cards. You want to make sure you pack them at the end of the trip to make sure you don't run out. And every time you head out of your room, whether it's the exhibit hall, the classes, or social events, make sure you have cards with you. And, I also want to remember, you don't have to go through this alone. Attach yourself to somebody who's already a good networker. At my very first forum, I was only a few years out of the military, and I was following a very strict schedule because that's what we did. Woke up at 5 a.m., went for a run, go down, have breakfast, go to classes. I was probably in the front row or the second row taking notes, went to dinner, and then back to my room. And that's what I did for 3 straight days. On the last day, the last class, somebody asked me if I was going to the social event. Didn't know what they were talking about, and that person took pity on me and said, come with me. And they introduced me to a group of people, and in that group was my mentor, he didn't know it at the time, Paul Balbastro. Paul was one of those folks who can walk into any room, in any industry, in any part of the world, and walk out with 3 new friends. He's a master network. He's open, gregarious, very comfortable himself. And as I said, he became my friend and my mentor. He allowed me to shadow him when he went to the NPF. He'd tell me, come on with me. He'd bring me to different meetings, to different PCC groups, and introduce me to folks. So through him, I was able to build up my confidence. And the more confidence I had, the easier it was to do it by myself. There's a lot of people like Paul at the forum. Don't forget, it's important rather, to practice networking. Harvey said this is learned behavior like learning to swim. So before you go into an event, remind yourself you're going to network. Prepare yourself for going up to people and introducing yourself. Get comfortable with it. And this is a good thing. When I attend events for speakers, when you give them an opportunity, they want to talk with you. It could be very intimidating. So before I walk in, I check my business card, I check for how I'm going to introduce myself, and I walk in ready and prepared. And lastly, don't forget that listening is good. If you're by nature a quiet person, that's okay. Be interested, not interesting. People love to hear the sound of their own voice, and people love to have an audience. So if you're quiet, you can be that audience, and they will thank you for it, and they will remember you for it. So don't forget, it's good to listen. And lastly, don't forget that you are the only you and the best you out there. And the only way we're ever going to meet with you is that if you become part of our network. There are other people that are on this webinar who want to network with you. And we can't wait to see you at the National Postal Forum in San Antonio.
Mark, before we go, let me check the chat box for any questions, and we don't have any. So Mark, thank you very much for this information you shared with us today. I'd also like to thank our listeners. If you'd like any additional information, please visit our website at www.berkshire-company.com. Mark, any last comments?
Well, I want to thank all of you for taking the time to attend this webinar. I'll be sending out an email later today with the handouts and also a link to the recording. But most importantly, I really look forward to meeting you and networking with you at the National Postal Forum in San Antonio next month. Thank you, and have a great day.